Welcome to 56-Bit Cloud Cafe, your go-to destination for all tech topics in the cloud. I'm Athir Zalal.
And I'm Patrick Camilleri. And together we'll be addressing various cloud topics.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our podcast series on ECS, Elastic Container Service, where we dive deep into managing containers on AWS. In this episode, we will lay the groundwork by exploring what ECS is and its key features. So let's start. We continuously hear about several container management tools in the tech space. What is ECS and how does it differ from other container management services?
So ECS, or Elastic Container Service, is an AWS service that simplifies the running of your containerized applications. Unlike when you run containers directly on EC2, or maybe using other services like ECS, which we've discussed in other episodes, ECS provides a managed service to orchestrate deployments. It scales those containers depending on how much traffic you have, and schedules those containers on different EC2 instances or on the serverless version of that, which is the Fargate service from AWS. You can compare it to services like Docker Swarm or Kubernetes. This is an in-house developed service from AWS, and its main advantage is it offers deep integration with the broader AWS ecosystem, and also can scale to handle very large deployments.
Just like every other AWS service, some parts are critical and some are extra or elaborate. So what are the core components of ECS architecture?
Right, so ECS's core components are elements or resources in AWS which are known as clusters. This is the first in a hierarchical set of components that you need to create. An ECS cluster, which is basically a logical grouping of resources where your containers or the applications inside those containers will run. Within a cluster, you can define what are known as task definitions. So just like Kubernetes has pods, in ECS there are tasks. And these tasks contain, inside them there are the containers that we've been talking about. These tasks, they are defined you can define them in a programmatic format, in a file structure, and the things that you need to define include the container image, the CPU, maximum CPU size, the memory, the network configuration, storage configuration, a bunch of things like that. Very, very similar to the ECS and Kubernetes service that we've been discussing in previous episodes. ECS then uses those task definitions to launch and ultimately maintain the states of those tasks, which, as I said, contain the containers that ultimately run your application. ECS ensures that they are scaled, those tasks. It will scale them automatically based on traffic and on your needs, depending on the rules that you set in another component known as a service. A service will group these tasks together with specific configuration related to scaling and where they are hosted, in which network, in which availability zone, things like that. So it's a number of components that are grouped together, starting from the cluster, then there is the service, then there are the tasks, which are defined by a task definition.
Containers, despite being at the core of almost any setup, other services are needed to operate it. How does ECS integrate with other AWS services like EC2, ECR, and IAM?
Yes, one of the biggest advantages of ECS is that it can leverage very closely and very easily other AWS services because it's ultimately inbuilt into that ecosystem. It provisions EC2 instances to run those containers. It's like having worker nodes in Kubernetes. Those EC2s will run the containers and the application inside them. The containers will be brought to life from the container images, and those images can be stored in another service known as the Elastic Container Registry, ECR, which is also an AWS service. Of course, you can also use external services as well apart from ECR. There is very deep integration with IAM, Identity and Access Management, which ultimately controls all the access and permissions for ECS, for those components we spoke about, for the cluster, for the task definitions, the services and the tasks themselves. And also the underlying EC2 instances or the Fargate service which are running those tasks. There is integration with other services as well, like very deep integration with CloudWatch, including Container Insights, which gives you a deeper level of insights into your containers. And ultimately, all this, what it allows you to do is have an easier way of getting to the end goal, which is a scalable, faster running, more reliable and secure application running on containers in AWS.
From what we've discussed, ECS seems to be a tough competitor in the competition. What are the benefits of using ECS for containerized applications?
There are several advantages to using ECS. Most importantly, it simplifies container orchestration. That's the whole point of having such an orchestrator for your container system. It removes the burden of managing any infrastructure related to that container orchestration. So Kubernetes, for example, you have to install it and you have to manage the container orchestration. Now, if you use EKS, which we've discussed before, then you are removing and simplifying the burden to manage that orchestrator. ECS is completely managed. In fact, it's given as a service. It has a lot of advanced features, offers scalability, offers reliability, security, and it integrates deeply and seamlessly with other services from AWS. It allows you to have a unified development and ultimately deployment experience for your applications. Oh, and by the way, it's also free. So there is no charge to using ECS as the container orchestration. The underlying EC2 instances or Fargate, which is hosting your application, your containers, that is obviously chargeable, but the orchestrator itself, the service, is free of charge.
And by now, we've reached the end of our first episode on ECS. Stay tuned for our next episode where we will delve into ECS cluster management and task definitions. Until then, happy cloud computing!
If you have questions, suggestions, or want to share your feedback, connect with us on social media.
Also, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and to leave us a review to help others find their way to the Cloud Cafe.